gonna do this one. Slugs are cool. I'm not back.
Slugs! This is a slug, a big slug. But he's going pretty fast, so we need to freeze spray. Time for some slug anatomy. Optical tentacles, also known as eye stalks. This is how slugs see. It can look in front with one tentacle and to the back with the other, at the same time. Sensory tentacles. Slugs use these to feel and taste and smell their way around. Mantle. It's what creates the shell of snails, but in slugs it's just the dorsal surface, or back, of the animal. On the right side of the mantle is the pneumostome. It's like a breathing hole, but we filmed the left side of the animal, so you can't see it. Look it up. The keel. It's the narrow ridge that runs along a slug's back, but not all slug species have them. The foot. It's a super strong muscle. It's how the slug gets from point A to point B, just like you and me. It flexes the foot starting at the back of the body and then ripples up towards the head, and it slowly slides across the ground. The skirt. It's a fringed extension of the sole, or the bottom of the foot, that meets the ground, and it helps the slug move. Isn't it cool? If you watch along the bottom of the slug's body, you can see the foot and the skirt moving it along. Slugs are cool.
And we're also celebrating the successful rehabilitation of a new rescued animal. Bridget is here with us today because she's kind of a big fan of Animal Wonders, and you've been following us for a couple years now, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and do you want to learn as much as you can about animals?
Of course.
Of course. So I just took her on a tour of all the animals, and she got to meet almost all of them and see how we take care of them and how they're housed. What did you think about it all?
I think that was pretty cool.
It was pretty fun. While we were visiting the animals, I got to share one of our success stories of one of our newest animals, and I'd like to share that story with you now. Bridget, who is this?
This is Titus, the red-footed tortoise.
We rescued Titus about 2 months ago, and he was in pretty terrible shape. He was severely malnourished. He had several open wounds on his legs, and he was infested with worms. All right, Bridget, do you want to hold him?
Yes.
Nicely done. Now, I bet when most people look at him, they might not be able to see that anything is wrong, but I'd like to compare him to a healthy red-footed tortoise so you can really see the difference. This is Yuka, and she's an 8-year-old female, and she's been in our care for pretty much her entire life. Bridget, what's the biggest difference that you see between these two?
Titus's shell is a lot more bumpy.
It is. Look at that. Exactly. Now, this is actually a pretty common thing that happens to tortoises that aren't receiving the proper care. Titus's carapace, or top portion of his shell, should not be this bumpy. We call this structure pyramiding, and it suggests a couple things. Poor nutrition, lack of humidity in the environment, and inadequate levels of calcium. So I could tell at first glance that he wasn't getting the care he needed. And with a little history and a quick physical examination, I learned more. Titus is reported to be about 10 years old, and his previous owner thought he was female, but I can tell he's male because he has a concave plastron, or bottom portion to his shell,
Fibers on his
and a large
legs.
tail. Compared to Yuka, Yuka, who we know is a female, she has a flat plastron and a smaller tail. Being 2 years older and also a male should make him larger than Yuka, but as you can see, he's quite a bit smaller. Bridget, can you do me a favor and switch tortoises with me?
Sure.
Which one's heavier?
Probably Yuka.
Yeah. Yuka has a thick, well-formed shell, where Titus does not. The reason that you might not have noticed that Titus's shell is malformed is because improper humidity and lack of calcium are common mistakes. So people are used to seeing it and think it's normal. Titus's shell will never go back to looking like Yuka's shell. So it's our responsibility to let people know that his shell is not normal. So we can begin to reverse the myth that pyramiding is okay. It's not, and it can be prevented if given proper care from the beginning. So I do think it's important to talk about an animal's past and how improper care led to the situation that we're in now, but I also want to celebrate the future, especially because Bridget's here and she wants to go into animal care. I want to emphasize how incredibly important vet care and proper husbandry are to maintaining a happy and healthy animal. So let's talk about Titus's rescue and recovery story. We got Titus when his previous owner realized after 10 years that he wasn't female and he couldn't have babies, so he didn't want him anymore. Despite giving him a proper environment and offering nutritious food at Animal Wonders, Titus refused to eat for the first 2 weeks. We became extra concerned after a visit to the vet, where a fecal exam revealed that he had a severe infestation of worms. Parasites can cause dehydration, weakness, and deplete the host of nutrients. And since you can't really force a tortoise to take his medicine, Titus was in trouble. After another week of no eating, we became so concerned that our vet suggested possible surgery to insert a feeding tube. That way we could get the much-needed nutrients into him as well as his dewormer. But before we decided to have surgery done, we wanted to make sure that we exhausted all our other options. Instead of just misting him 2 to 3 times every day, we began giving him mandatory 30-minute soaks in warm water daily to try and combat the dehydration. He also spent a minimum of 30 minutes outside every day to get natural sunlight. We were also hoping this would entice him to eat some fresh dandelion greens, but he continued to refuse all food. After a week on this schedule, he surprised us and he ate. Just a few bites, but at least it was something. 5 days later, he ate a whole half a plate of salad. He continued to eat sporadically over the next month, but in these last 10 days, he's eaten every single day. Titus has now successfully been dewormed, and he continues to enjoy soaks and eating and playing outside in the garden. I'm excited to continue offering him new foods to see what he likes the best. I think it's strawberries. That's what he ate first this morning, right? Yeah, he eats that first every single time, but it's hard to tell because he's actually eating everything I'm giving him now. I'm excited because Titus is doing so great, and he's going to make an excellent animal ambassador. Thank you for helping me share Titus's recovery story. I hope that you had fun meeting all the animals today.
And I, of course, did.
Awesome! When I was Bridget's age, I was inspired by a raptor rehabilitator who came to my school, and also a veterinarian who allowed me to volunteer at her clinic. Having role models who I could identify with and also interact with was integral in helping me embrace my passion for animal rescue and education. I hope all of you enjoyed meeting Titus today and are as excited as we are about his newfound appetite.
This is the first time we were actually able to collect, incubate, and successfully hatch the eggs. It's a really big deal, first of all, because this female crocodile, the mother, is in the stud book, which runs the genetics of the captive population to ensure we get good genetic variation in the captive population and ensure the best health of the animals. They build a mountain nest, Cuban crocodiles, so we've seen them breeding, and we knew she was nesting. Once she laid the eggs, we separated her out, and we go in and collect them from the nest. At that point, we weigh and measure the eggs and set them up in the incubators. We set them up in 2 different incubators, and we aim for male crocodiles. So crocodiles have temperature determinate sex ratio, which means the temperature at which they're incubated will determine the sex of the baby. So we incubated them between 90.5 and 89.6, which is a really small gradient to try to maintain. There's like 3,000 to 6,000 estimated left in the wild, so they have a lot of pressure from habitat destruction, and they also have American crocodiles that are kind of migrating into their territory, and they're actually hybridizing, which is weakening the Cuban genetics. They're a nice yellowish color. They're beautiful animals. They really are. And I think that's what makes them a really good zoo exhibit as well.
Jesse, and this is Animal Wonders. I love animals, and I love sharing everything I know about them so their awesomeness can be better understood by everyone. Bearded dragons are commonly kept as pets, but for being known as a beginner reptile, it's unfortunate that their care is commonly misunderstood. Let's take a closer look at bearded dragons and learn what they are, where they come from, and how we can properly take care of them in captivity. This is Bindi, and he's an adult male. We thought he was a female when he was younger. These guys are awesome, but to begin to understand Bindi, we need to unpackage all the known information about them. Let's start by classifying him so we can figure out exactly what he is. He's in the kingdom Animalia because he's an animal. Phylum Chordata. Basically, he has a spine. Class Reptilia because he's a tetrapod, ectothermic, and he doesn't have an aquatic larval stage. Order Squamata because he has overlapping scales. Suborder Iguania because he's closely related to iguanas and chameleons. Family Agamidae because his teeth are consolidated with his jawbone instead of being located on the inner rim, and his habitat is in the Old World as opposed to the New World. This family consists of about 300 species, often called dragons, and many of them have limited color-changing abilities. Genus Pagona, which consists of 8 species called bearded dragons. They have spiky scales on their throat, which can turn a darker shade in order to communicate. And species Vidyceps, or central bearded dragon, found in Central Australia. Now we know what he is, let's move on to where they come from, and this part will help us know how to take care of them in captivity. Research on Australian reptiles is fairly limited compared to reptiles on other continents. Therefore, we're still learning a lot of new information yearly. These guys first show up in written record in 1964, when Eric Worrell wrote about them in his book, Australian Reptiles. Since then, they have received much more research, so we know their natural habitat and natural behaviors. There are 8 species of bearded dragons, each coming from a different area, and sometimes their habitats overlap. Today, we're focusing on Pagona Vidyceps, which come from Central Australia. The habitat there consists of semi-arid forests, arid forests, and rocky deserts. There they spend a good amount of time hanging out in the branches of trees or bushes, but they also like to venture down and bask on rocks in the sun. If it gets too hot or too cold, they'll burrow under the ground to maintain the right temperature. These guys are opportunistic omnivores, meaning they'll eat anything nearby that fits in their mouth. Grasshoppers, beetles, and other insects are favorites, but they'll also eat bark, leaves, flowers, and fruit. Their natural predators include humans, dingoes, birds of prey, cats, larger lizards, and cars. They mostly depend on their camouflage to keep them safe, often using the freezing method and waiting for the predator to go away. If pursued, they'll run away with their awkward side-legged gait and try and run up a tree or wedge themselves between rocks. Their belly and back scales all go in one direction, so it's difficult for them to go backwards. See how I can run my hand down his scales, but when I try and go upward, it catches. This helps them from slipping backwards when they're climbing and staying wedged in rocky crevices. These back scales are also really interesting because they can change color depending on the temperature. They get darker when it's cooler and lighter when it's warmer, and this is going to help them with thermal regulation. One of the most fascinating things about bearded dragons is their flamboyant nonverbal communication. Central bearded dragons are not social in the wild, but they will sometimes congregate in popular areas. If they are irritated by another, they will inflate the scales on their throat and turn it a dark shade of black, signaling irritation. Males are very territorial, and they'll combine their blackened beard with a head bob up and down to signal dominance. If they want to be even more intimidating, they'll stand up on their tippy toes, open their mouth in a gape, and hiss. Males that aren't up for a fight will let the dominant male know by taking their front arm and waving it in submission. Females will do the same arm waving if they accept a male that's doing courtship behavior. During the courtship, the male will bob his head up and down rapidly, putting on a great display of robust health. If the female is not receptive, she'll bob her head back, blacken her throat, and block any attempts with body positioning. Pagona Vidyceps, like Bindi, are very prominent and robust in the wild. It's illegal to export these guys from Australia, and it's likely that all of those currently in captivity originated from a few that were smuggled out in the 1960s, which is how these guys ended up as pets in homes across the world. So now that we've got a good understanding about these guys' natural history, let's learn how we can provide them a happy and healthy life in captivity. First off, we'll need to start with giving them a large enough space so they can do all their natural activities while also simulating their natural environment. For babies, you can use a 10 to 20 gallon tank, but as they grow, you'll need to increase their size to at least 60 gallons. Most people use a glass aquarium or plastic vivarium. We've chosen to repurpose a big box store's plastic aquatic tank that I think used to house baby turtles. It's 48 inches long, 16 inches deep, and 16 inches tall. To simulate their natural environment, you'll first need to get the right temperature. You'll need an under-tank heater or an overhead heat lamp to get the normal temperature 78 to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll also need a basking light that reaches temperatures of 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. At night, the basking light should be turned off and the ambient temperature should remain in the 70s. If you're using an overhead light as your only source of heat, you're going to need another heat lamp for the nighttime that's either ceramic or holds a night bulb that produces minimal blue light. Having a daytime light on 24 hours will impede their ability to sleep, leading to stress, poor appetite, and eventual death. Try to position the UV bulb as close to the basking light as you can so they can get both at the same time. We've arranged a basking platform so she can climb up and get fairly close to her heat source. We also have a shelf right there underneath her UV so she can climb up there if she wants. Alright, next thing is substrate, what you're going to put on the bottom of the enclosure. Most pet stores are going to recommend calci sand because bearded dragons are considered desert animals. And while this is partially true, they don't spend all of their time on the sand. The problem with sand and other loose substrates like gravel, rabbit pellets, and wood shavings is that bearded dragons have sticky tongues. They love to taste test their environment, like going around and licking things. And when they hunt down their prey, they'll often consume materials around them. This can lead to irritation in their GI tract, impaction, and death. Over the years, we've used several substrates that are safe and easy to clean. For babies, I would recommend paper towels. It's not that pretty, but young beardies can easily become impacted, and with paper towels, there's no loose substrate, and cleanup is super quick. As they get older, you can use reptile carpet, ceramic tiles, newspaper, or rocks. Mindy is about 5 years old, and we're trying out some new substrates to give her some variety. So far, Mindy prefers to perch on her rocks or lounge in the corner on her clay mound. Alright, the next feature you'll need to add is a source of water. In the wild, bearded dragons don't drink much water at all, but in captivity, they can't readily search out water if they need it, so it's a good idea to provide some just in case. We use a small water dish in the corner, but you can also use a dripper, or you can gently mist them on the nose and let them lick it off if they're thirsty. To keep them well fed, you'll need to offer them a variety of foods, just like they would find in the wild. As babies, they'll mostly eat small crickets. Keep in mind that they can't eat a food item larger than the width between their eyes. As they grow up and become juveniles, they'll begin to eat vegetation as well. Offer a salad of fresh greens and veggies several times a week. I recommend chopped red leaf lettuce with a sprinkle of yam, carrot, or squash on top. As an adult, Bindi gets salad Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The other 4 days, she gets a meat product, mealworms, crickets, or cockroaches. Don't offer too many mealworms or cockroaches because their exoskeletons can cause impaction. Bearded dragons usually aren't very social with their own species, but they can enjoy human interaction. And they're quite smart. They can recognize faces, and recent studies have revealed that they can learn by observation. Thanks for joining me today. By learning about what these guys are and where they come from, we can know how to take care of them in captivity.